Scott, thanks for joining us today and congratulations on being the recipient of the fourth Visionary Award.
Yeah, hey, Bob, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you and an even greater pleasure to accept this award on behalf of Kimberly-Clark. It's a real honor and testament to the work our teams are doing every day.
Well, we think you guys deserve it. I'm a longtime admirer of Kimberly-Clark as a company. I feel like saying longtime listener, first-time caller, but there you go. I also had the opportunity to interview you twice in the last couple of years. First time we talked about planning at Kimberly-Clark. We had a great panel discussion. And then about EARL, which we'll talk a little bit about more now. So I'm looking forward to learning more. To get us started, can you tell us just briefly about your role at KCC? What are you responsible for?
Yeah, no, thank you, Bob. At Kimberly-Clark, I have a global accountability for planning and distribution, and that really manifests itself in three ways. Customer-facing supply chain engagements with our top customers around the globe, number one. Number two, all things planning, so demand planning, supply planning, S&OP, network design. And then number three, I have accountability for physical distribution. So think about warehousing, transportation, and order fulfillment. So all of those things are a part of my remit.
Right. Slightly different question, but along the same line. So just tell us a little bit about the scope of KCC's supply chain. For instance, you talked about physical distribution, transportation, things like number of plants, distribution centers, number of shipments, SKUs, those kind of things.
Yeah, the Kimberly-Clark fundamentally is serving a quarter of the world's population every day, and our motto that we talked about is really better care for a better world. And our supply chain then to do that has hundreds of manufacturing and distribution facilities all around the globe. We are shipping thousands of orders per day out to our customers and our consumers. And we have 45,000 employees that are part of the greater supply chain from procurement, manufacturing, distribution, order management, and customer management. So that's a bit of a scope of what we do. I think people will know that, we have brands like Kleenex and Huggies and Kotex, Depends and Andrex and so many more. And that's how people know Kimberly-Clark, likely is through our brands.
The first time we chatted on the webinar about planning, we were still kind of in the pandemic and things were still, a little bit topsy-turvy. And it seemed as if during the pandemic, planning, followed by procurement when we were coming out, planning really took a hit, right? Like nobody had an experience to say, well, what do you do when the world shuts down? And then the flip side was nobody had ever had the experience of, well, what do you do when the world, starts back up? We had other planners on that thing, and again, it was a pretty chaotic time. Now, when we spoke last spring, we were talking about logistics and transportation. One of the things I asked was, "Hey, we're coming out of the pandemic. What are things like for you now?" And you described it as a reset moment for the supply chain. Talk a little bit about what you learned coming out of the pandemic and what that means. What does it mean to have a reset for the supply chain?
Yeah. Now, it's really important to think that during the pandemic itself, we set about three very clear objectives. Number one, let's keep our employees safe. Let's keep our consumers safe. And let's do all that we can to maintain business continuity. And it was under that umbrella, Bob and team, that we really were able during that time to make very fast decisions on number one, are the protocols in our manufacturing and distribution facilities set to keep employees safe? Number two, are we at the utmost confidence relative to the product quality and our specifications that we're supposed to deliver? And then number three, how do we maintain? And this process of gathering up information to understand, what is our inbound supply chain? What is the day-to-day status of our manufacturing facilities? How are orders coming into and flowing out of our distribution centers? It was a real exercise in speeding everything up and letting all of the distractions move to the side and just being really focused. And we learned a lot during that time, and we also exposed some improvement opportunities, quite honestly, and I'm sure others will have seeing the same kind of thing. A lot of manual data pulling, a lot of disparate systems that were not connected end to end. And ultimately, we showed ourselves and our consumers that we were able to make fast decisions. And so the reset now is, for us, is being very intentional about those lessons. What is our product portfolio? Is it performing well? Are we rigorous around S&OP? Are our planning ecosystems connected to our procurement and distribution systems? I mean, these are the kind of things that excite me because they come from the lessons of what we learned during the pandemic and inspire us to do more in the future.
You said something kind of interesting, which was because it sounds almost like going through that was like a triage, you're performing triage, right? You're bringing people in from the battlefield and you've got to make very quick decisions. And one of the things you said there was that it uncovered, shortcomings that you may not have realized. There's the Warren Buffett line that when the tide goes out, you see who's skinny dipping, right?
Right.
So it
Right.
sounds like the pandemic, in one sense, from a operational standpoint, identified the shortcomings and created an opportunity to say, well, how do we shore that up to go forward?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it, Bob. And one of the things that became really clear is that as a international company with manufacturing distribution spread across the globe, that we had a great opportunity here to become much more intentional, to leverage our scale and to bring some practices to bear with how we operate the business, how we operate our technical stack, how we operate the supply chain in a day in and day out basis that fundamentally would allow us to make faster decisions and to move in a more coordinated way and to make decisions for both the short term and the long term that are more connected with the day-to-day business. And I'm talking about the business of talking to consumers, creating products, deciding, what and where to sell things. It's those kind of connections between business decisions, think commercial decisions, and the supply chain's ability to support and advance those decisions. I think that makes things very exciting, difficult, but very exciting.
So historically, business was over here and operations was over here, and they spoke a different language, right? The things that, well, you can disagree, but the things that were important to plant managers or distribution centers managers, the things they measured success on, were not the things the CFO looked at, right? It was
Right.
it was a different thing. That seems to have really been changing in the last decade. So how's your business changing in ways that impact you as a supply chain manager to become more aligned with, what Kimberly-Clark wants to accomplish from the business and sales and all of that?
Right, right. It's a really important point here, and that is the mindset that we're working to instill in everyone in the company is the mindset of the consumer is first. So if we put the consumer first, then the general managers of the business, the P&L owners, the CFO, everyone is then focused on that sort of outcome, which has allowed us to bring more clarity to the metrics and the scorecards that we're speaking to the C-level of the organization on a regular basis. More discipline around the cadence of S&OP and IBP, this idea that that rigor brings flexibility. It might sound a little bit odd, but in that rigor of this process, decision making and clarity and honesty about what is our service level, what is our on-shelf availability, what is our inventory position, what is our cost of operation. All of these things are now very clearly articulated. And of course, we continue, like any large organization that works in a matrix, we continue to have healthy debate and rigorous discussions about the right kind of courses of actions. But I think we've become very clear on, what are the outcomes that are we looking for, and is the work that we're doing really benefiting the consumer, not only with the product they're asking for or expecting the experience, but also, with the value equation. Is it at the right price point for them?
Have you had to, in your manufacturing, you're going to, run the way you're going to run, but in distribution, are you having to change the way you serve the customer? Meaning, if you think about like small retail, they went from smaller and more frequent deliveries, right? As opposed to getting, a truckload on pallets once a week, they wanted to get 3 deliveries a week of cartons, things like that. On the distribution side, as a major CPG manufacturer, are you having to change how you service your customer on the distribution? And are those expectations or requirements changing?
Yeah. Well, the short answer is yes, but the bit of the longer answer is it has become, and we think it's key for success in this business to really be deeply connected and integrated with our top customers around the globe, quite
Yeah.
honestly. And in some cases, the conversations can be a bit transactional or tactical, like this is what I want my pallet to look like, or this is what I want my lead time to be, or this is the way that I want to you to respond relative to order shipping. But we're working to drive those conversations up to a more strategic level. How do our physical footprints overlap? When we look at the joint supply chain with one, whether it's a small format store or a big box store or a distributor, or a medical device supply company, the extent that we can look together at our physical supply chains and at the information flow, then we think we can improve availability. And so it's been really, it's almost as if, Bob, that we're creating the ability to be choiceful and intentional with customers about how we engage and what outcomes do they want. Do they want high frequency deliveries? Do they want low cost deliveries? Do they want lead time? Is there a value to the consumer by reducing or maybe expanding lead time? Certainly fill rate and OTIF in that conversation is still key and fundamental, but we're hoping to move, not just that, but beyond that and start talking about joint supply chains.
Um,
So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. One last foundational question. Then I want to talk about your digital transformation, the EARL side of it, the other things you're doing. At the Association for Supply Chain Management, they always have a session of what keeps you up at night. So, as somebody with global responsibility, I'm sure there's any number of things that wake you up at 3 in the morning. But what keeps you up at night? Or if you think about it, you talked at the beginning, like pandemic uncovered areas, of your operations to target. If you think in the coming years, what do you want to target that you're free to talk about?
Yeah, no, I'm very excited. Of course, I sleep fine at night because I feel good that we have a clear and intentional path and support of the senior leadership team of this company, to advance these things that I've spoken about: high levels of availability, high levels of performance, quality, um, business continuity, and supply chain delivery. I think I'm really most excited about this idea that we can advance across multiple fronts. We can advance on better connected with our suppliers through digital procurement. We're installing a brand new planning ecosystem that'll be much faster and much more ability to see across the end supply chain and make decisions. We're bringing robotics, and we're bringing smart and intelligent fulfillment capabilities to the organization. And I'm excited about all those things. And one of the things that I do spend a lot of time thinking about is, yes, the technical aspects of things, but the change management inside of the organization. There's a lot of change in addition to commercial program changes and product changes and all of those things. And the thing that I spend a lot of time on and would encourage others to think about is the change management aspect of these hundreds or thousands of employees who have been doing things a certain way. And now we provide the ability to do things in a different, faster, better, smarter, data-driven way. And their capability to absorb that and use it to the advantage of the company is one of the things that keep me and my team very engaged across the globe.
And hold that thought. I'm going to come back to people at the end, but I was
Okay,
going to segue there, but I know we're going to talk about that a little later. But I think it's an
sure.
important conversation. So let's talk a little bit about digital transformation. I know, like every major organization, you're in the midst of that, and it's one of those terms that there's no definition for digital transformation. It gets defined by every organization doing it. So if you think about what you're trying to accomplish at Kimberly-Clark, what does digital transformation for you, and what's your starting point? Because that's always the challenge of, where do I start
Yeah.
trying to do this?
Yeah, it's obviously it's a broad-based activity, and again, it does really start with the consumer and our company's understanding of the consumer and what motivates her, what does she care about, what are those, and what do we know, and how do we engage with her, and then using that information to really so we're improving and investing in our ability to understand and connect one-on-one directly, with consumers in their everyday lives. But narrow it down maybe more to the supply chain. I think our starting point really is this idea that what is the problem we're trying to solve and what business outcomes and processes do we want to change? We know we have an opportunity to connect with a broad array of suppliers to understand their state of their business, their capacity, their ability to fulfill on time and in full. So putting a solution in place that allows us to see and understand and have that conversation digitally, that's a problem we're trying to solve. In the manufacturing space, it certainly is making sure that the labor, the teams that make up our manufacturing teams are fundamentally, do they have the support of smart robotics? Do we have an understanding of real-time status of ahead or behind? Are we making sure that our changeovers are as efficient as possible by using technology that allows the workers to be connected to the best practices? So that's a problem we're trying to solve. How do we assist the labor inside our manufacturing? In distribution, it's a lot about understanding the customer. What are they ordering and why? Will that provide on-shelf availability? Are we digitally connected with them? And of course, I leave planning to the end, but planning, you've heard me say this before, Bob, probably, but I see planning as the orchestrator, the whole orchestra, that's the conductor. And in that sense, planning, our problem we're solving is how do we see across the end-to-end supply chain in a real-time or near real-time way to make the best supply chain response and demand response based on what's going to happen this afternoon and tomorrow and next week, so that we'll become much more agile in the ability to respond, sort of continually sensing the state of the supply chain and adjusting. So it's kind of a long answer probably, but I will tell you that it's key to start with the consumer, but then start with the business problem and then apply the technology to that business problem. And that's what we mean when we talk about the digital transformation.
Let's talk about EARL, because it's a concrete example, and it was also my entree to digital transformation at Kimberly-Clark. So you developed this to attack an inbound transportation challenge. Talk a little bit about what did you want to solve for, how you went about it, and then what were the challenges that you might have had moving that direction.
Yeah, just a short review here. The problem, again, that we were trying to solve is that inside of our distribution centers, orders were flowing in, but in a way that caused them to be very uneven throughout the week. Certainly Monday's very large, plan of work for Monday and Tuesday, and then less on Wednesday, and then virtually less on Thursday. And it's just the nature of the delivery cycle. Place an order to deliver in 24, 48 hours. That's
right.
But the problem is, well, that caused us to at times not have the right labor plan in place, or the right specific transport plan in place, or if we were able to, it was at an incremental cost. And certainly what EARL then does, this process, is to provide the artificial intelligence, but the ability, more than a human can do, to look across the planning system, the order fulfillment system, the transport system, and the WMS system, and to see opportunities for us to pick up and move orders to another date that would still allow for on-time delivery to the customer and the customer's expectation, but then would level out the load to some degree on our physical distribution centers and transport teams. And it is that, unique specific problem that the technology lends itself to. And, you can certainly have a point of view that a human being could do that. And we were trying, but it would take a large number of human beings to see across all these systems in almost real time. And so that's why we think this approach on level loading, early release and tendering process allows us to take advantage of the technology for solving that business problem.
So I kind of quickly explain how that works, and then also talk about the benefit you're driving. As an example, is it running real time all the time? What's the data that it's extracting to make these decisions? And also, does it recommend decisions or does it make the decision? In other words, does it send it back to your transportation planners who can accept a plan, or override a plan? Just briefly a little bit about how it works.
Yeah, well, a handful of things. Number one, it is always on. Okay. So once you install it, we make decisions about where we apply it and in what subset of our order volume where it's applied.
Okay.
Number two, it is gathering information. Real time is probably an exaggeration, but in near real time, throughout the day, from our SAP order management system, from our TMS system, and from our WMS systems. And it is looking continually for the opportunities to adjust the orders as I described before. Now, the point of action really comes mostly when we're deploying stock to ourselves. We make stock in manufacturing facilities. Sometimes we ship it direct to the customer, but many times we're shipping it out to our distribution network. And so that deployment planning process, we call that deployment, we're deploying stock. That deployment planning process, then, where the technology is changing deployment orders inside of the tool set so that the deployment order, the stock transfer that might have moved on Tuesday is now going to move on Sunday. And so it is pushing back into the ecosystem those recommendations.
And can a planner override it, or is it making the decisions?
Yeah, no, the decisions that will be made visible to the deployment planner in this case. It can be the customer, but in this case, the deployment planner. And for the most part, the deployment planner accepts them. They can choose to say, no, I know something about that's not in the system yet, and override it or adjust it, of course. And so the human being still has the ultimate accountability, but the technology is making it much easier to sort through all of this data.
And I remember from doing the interview, you've had some pretty good benefits from it.
Yeah, you'll know, and maybe for the audience, we started with a pilot, one site, and we've now expanded it across the site, across our sites in North America. And we're seeing the benefit that can be counted in the millions of dollars annually. I mean, that's probably the easiest way I can tell you as well, that our deployment adherence to delivery continues to be very high, and our safety stock buffer tank mix continues to be improved by the technology. So, those are three measures: dollars, of course, in the millions, but really good buffer stock adherence and very good deployment adherence.
So two last areas, and I'm going to come to people last. So the first is, on your website, you've got your 2030 goals. How is it seems increasingly that when it comes to sustainability goals, supply chain is kind of where the rubber hits the road, right? So how is that driving your supply chain, or what role is supply chain going to play in Kimberly-Clark's sustainability goals?
Yeah, it's paramount, so top, the sustainability organization, just as a matter of understanding, is a part of the broad supply chain at Kimberly-Clark.
Okay.
We can think fundamentally about a number of aspects. We can think about resource usage, so the usage of water in our manufacturing sites and natural gas to run our manufacturing facilities. Certainly in that arena, use of fiber to make our items, the use of polymers to make our items. All of those things have very clear targets of improvement, so reduction. Over time, some of the solutions are based on new technologies, digital sensing capabilities that allow us to see in real time where we might be losing or wasting some of these precious resources. That certainly is a key. And our sourcing programs and our ability to bring technology to the product specification to reduce the need for some of these items, certainly reducing the amount of plastic that we need to produce our products. That's all very clear. And the second thing that's very clear is that, within this area of scope 3, we have the ability to see now how much greenhouse gas our transportation network, both inbound and outbound, not only is using, but to build upon that, to say, hey, can we make a different mode decision to reduce time on the road, being pulled by a diesel tractor? Can we make a decision to move more items, to consolidate more shipments together to reduce the distance traveled? And can we work with others, our customers at times, to make best use of the total fleet of transport? All of those things are a part of our plan to achieve our sustainability goals. And as you suggested early on, the supply chain is front and center where all that activity is happening.
So I want to end and take you back to something you talked about when you mentioned change management, that you've got, longtime valued employees who have been working a certain way, and now that's going to change. It's a reminder that we love automation, we love machines, we love robots, but supply chains are still run by people, right? And they're still, in many respects, operated by people. If you think about the supply chain workforce of the future, either at the C level, your planners, your procurement people, or the line level, the people running your plants, running your lift trucks, and all of that, what's the skill set you think the workforce of the future is going to need that perhaps isn't there? What's going to be the challenge for not just you, but for supply chain managers?
Right. Yeah, it's as I said before, it's one of the most foundational questions, and one that we, not just myself, but supply chain leadership team and at all levels across the company, are really thinking about. We know the math says that we get our cycle speed up, our tack time speeds up, the information speeds up when we bring digital transformation in these tools and these ecosystems. We know that's true. But we also know that, we think it's a great opportunity to support what the human beings, what people do. I mean, physically, you need people to make and consume these items.
Right.
The question is, are we educating people across our supply chain on the opportunity? Number two, are we making sure that their own personal value case, like I'm adding value by doing this activity, that we're allowing them to see, hey, you can add value in this new and different way, maybe in a more strategic way. Number three, we are very much in the search to develop this talent internally, the capability, what we call upskilling, this idea of provide the experience, provide the why, provide the educational opportunities, provide the connections, whether it's with local educational resources or internally or through broad organizations, to make sure that our workforce sees the need for this and then avails themselves to it. And then, finally, it's a point of, at times, we also need to go outside and find this capability, people who are comfortable with data and analytics, people who are not threatened by what the technology can bring, but can advance it for us. And, Bob, I've thought a lot about that analogy back in this some time ago, last century, let's just say in the 70s, not to date myself. If you were running a race car, you bought the race car, you worked on it yourself, you drove the race car around, but today, to be successful in any kind of racing, you have a team of people watching the boards. They're watching the brakes, they're watching the sensors, they're watching manifold temperatures, they're understanding all of these things. That is the supply chain of the future, where we're more supporting the technology and advancing the business conversation and letting some of the operational or transactional work, be done by the robotics and by the automation. I think it's that shift that we're very anxious to make, and I know many people are as well.
Great. Well, thank you. Scott, once again, thrilled to have you as the honoree for the Visionary Award this year. And thanks so much for taking your time today and sharing a little of Kimberly-Clark's supply chain story. That's all the time we have. Thank you.
Now, thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Bob.